My dad's forcing me to do something I do not want to do. I have to go and bail my sister out from jail after she assaulted my children. I'm 26 years old, a girl with 2 children, and I let my father and sister treat me like trash for so long. Don't really judge me. Nobody in their sane minds would put themselves in this position. I grew up with my parents, but I was very much closer to my mom while she was still alive, though. My mom got married to my dad at a young age. Actually, my dad was kind of forced by his parents into marrying her when it was discovered that my mother was pregnant with their first child. My older sister, Janet, this was probably the reason I never saw any chemistry between them. They were just like housemates tolerating each other. My mother was a chef at a big restaurant, while dad was an electrician. We weren't rich, but we could at least afford 2 square meals a day. My mother tried her best to ensure that my sister and I both grew up to be homely. But while I was diligent in learning how to manage a home from my mom, my sister was always never interested. She was stubborn and wanted to just be alone all the time, and so it was really no surprise that mom always had issues with her. While I was close to my mom, my sister, Janet, was closer to father. She would oftentimes go running to him when mom was about to punish her for not doing the dishes or any of the other tasks that she had refused doing. And dad never failed to rescue her. As time went by, their bond grew stronger, and when news began flying around that my sister had begun messing around with the boys at a very young age, my father did nothing. Neither did he let my mom do anything that would upset her. My mom's hands were practically tied by my father's, and so there was virtually nothing she could do except sit back and watch her first daughter get ruined. The lack of discipline and negligence, which was my father's doing, made my sister go into full-time prostitution. And even though my heartbroken mother was filled with shame, she failed severely in making my father see the need to help my sister. Janet has given up such a life. My father just turned a blind eye. I guess that's because Janet occasionally helped him out with money to go drinking and womanizing with his friends. My sister tried exposing me to her kind of life, but I was able to turn her down as a result of my mother's influence over me. Schooling was obviously not an option for my sister, and I, due to our not-so-wealthy background, so I had to get a job as a factory worker as soon as I was legal and physically able to. This was going to be my first time mingling with people outside my home for a long period of time. And so, being a young, naive girl, I soon found myself entangled with Evans, one of my co-workers who came under the disguise of getting married to me. All he wanted was just to sleep with me, and when he finally did, I got pregnant. My mother was really disappointed. She never saw it coming. If at all she expected one of her daughters to get pregnant outside of wedlock just like her, she would have picked my sister, who plied of her trade in prostitution. My father avoided me like the plague, while my sister mocked and derided me and our mom. She did not even bother to sympathize with me even a bit. Then one thing which she did was to advise me on getting an abortion. She claimed that not having children at that age should not be an option for me no matter what. She said that they would just simply tie me down, and I'll have my life wasted at the end of the day. Well, my sister was not just giving a random advice. She'd actually done a couple of abortions herself. And she even gave up her very child, which could not be aborted as the pregnancy was discovered too late for adoption. To be honest, I was actually contemplating it, but I'm just so thankful that I had the kind of mom that I did. My mother, who was not no doubt disappointed, she still did not leave me to fate. After all, she's too made the same mistake as I have, and would have been in the same shoe, pregnant without the trace of a father of her child. If my father's parents had not compelled him to marry her, yes, Evans ran away. My mother took care of me throughout the whole phase till I finally gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. My mother was glad at birth of my children because even though they came under an embarrassing circumstance, she was still a grandmother nonetheless. But my father acted as though I and my children simply never existed. Things went on well in the house with everyone doing and minding their business. I resumed work when my body had healed so I could raise money to support my kids. I was determined to give them a life that was way better than mine. Mom supported me in every way that she could, but she got bedridden with a stroke when my children were 5 years of age, and I was the only one taking care of her. My dad would occasionally show up in her room, ask a few questions before giving me a little bit of money, just so it would look like he was doing his duty as a husband. I never complained though, neither did Mom. Though it was never enough or given from a place of love and care, we still appreciated whatever he gave. It was sad, though, that sickness and the need to make an impression of people was what was compelling my dad to act like this. As for my sister Janet, she was never really around during this period. She just did not want any form of responsibility. She only came a few days before my mother passed. My mother somehow knew that she was going to die soon, and so she called us all together, my father, my sister, and I, and pleaded that we all looked out after each other. Then, in their presence, she gave me gold jewelry, which was passed down to her from her parents. The jewelry was worth some reasonable amounts of money at the market, and even though Mom advised I sold it to help ourselves and the children when things became tough, I declined because of its sentimental value to me. I was not going to sell off the only thing which had been in the family for generations. I wore it proudly around my neck. My mother's relationship with me had always made me sister jealous, and her jealousy only grew worse as the only thing which my mother gave to her was an advice to live right. My father did nothing. He was just surprised that my mother had such a jewelry with her for all these years. Well, my mom passed on, and that was like the darkest day of my life. Some would say I still had a family to lean on, but the truth remains that I never felt so lonely after her demise. How was I going to face the world without my mother by my side? Who was going to shield me from attacks that came from within and outside the family? I cried for days, but that was all I could do. Cry. My mother was not coming back. I was sure of that. I had to brace up and be the mother of my 2 little kids who were now the only companions I had. Shortly after Mother's funeral, my dad began bringing his waywardness into the house. My sister Janet suddenly began picking an interest in me and my children. I was glad because I needed my family during this trying time. She gifted me clothes and some other useful things, and though I did not want to accept it, I equally did not want to strain the relationship which she was trying to build with me. Plus, times were tough as a single mom of 2 kids, so I accepted them even though I never wore the clothes as they were skimpy. Janet soon came to me one day pleading that I grant her a favor. Well, I was not ready to break the sister bond which was growing between us, and so I willingly agreed to do anything within my power. That was a mistake. I should not have said anything. It turned out that she had a friend who was coming over for dinner. She needed me to meet with him. I did not know why she wanted me to meet with him at all this time, but that was not really the issue at hand. The problem was the fact that she wanted me to get a hairdo, put on some makeup, and one of those skimpy dresses which revealed my cleavage and all. I didn't want to carry on with the plan, but I made a promise, and a promise is a promise. So I had no other option than to follow through with the whole thing. Her guests finally arrived that evening, and while the 3 of us were sitting talking, I was quite absent-minded, and I was looking out for my kids who were in the room. I did observe, though, that Janet's friend would occasionally steal glances at me. It felt like an assessment. It was already late, and while I expected our guest to say his goodbye and leave, the reverse was the case. My sister soon excused herself, and I was left alone with her friend. No sooner had my sister left did her friend start making advances at me. He's caressing me. I felt violated, and my emotions reacted by giving him a dirty slap. I walked into my room where my kids were sleeping and locked the door. I was going to let my sister know what kind of jerk her friend was the next day. I don't really know what later transpired between my sister and her friend that night, but my sister was so angry with me the next morning before I even got to lay my complaint. In her rage, she accused me of making her lose money last night. That's when it dawned on me that my sister wanted me to be used for money. Her friend was one of her clients whom she wanted me set up with. I was bitter and broken. The whole sister bond charade was just an exploit. I took the case up to my father. At least he could talk some sense into my dumb sister. Or so I thought. I got to my father, whom I felt would handle the situation properly. I was so angry while complaining about what my sister had done, I busted into tears. My father, well, he did not console me. He was rather disgusted by my tears, and his words did not help matters either. He claimed that my sister was only trying to help me make a living as a single mom who was struggling with a job that did not pay nearly enough. I left his room feeling worse than I came in. I'm sure he would have received me warmly if I came to give him some of the cash I made last night if I slept with that client. My mother's dying plea was that we should look out for each other, and ever since her passing, I've been trying to see the possibilities of bonding with my sister and my dad, but after the episode where she tried exploiting me, I began resenting my sister and my father ever since then. I just avoided the both of them as much as I could. My sister's own anger from that night gradually grew into hate. She sought for every opportunity to pick a fight with me, but I did my best to avoid her. When it was clear she could not get my attention, she decided to verbally pick on my children. Yeah, my kids. My children had come crying to me on several occasions about the words that my sister had spoken to them. But rather than react, I did my best to pacify them about ignoring my sister, even though I burned with anger. No reasonable mother would ever sit back and watch her children being bullied without doing anything. And yes, I was a reasonable mother. I still am, but there's nothing that I could do. I began planning to save some money to go rent an apartment somewhere else, but I knew that my plan would really take a while as there was just no money. I had pulled my children out of school because I simply could not meet the cost of their education, which was constantly increasing day by day. I finally had a face-off with my sister one day, when I returned from the factory where I worked to find bruises on the body of my kids. I was mad when I learned that my sister was responsible for it. What could they have possibly done to my sister to deserve such brutality? These were children, and no matter what they did, had no right to inflict such injuries on them. Not even their own mother has that right. I confronted my sister, and well, she said that she was disciplining my children her way. What a hypocrite. My sister, who was the most irresponsible, undisciplined person that I've ever known, was talking about discipline. I could recount various occasions when she had run to my father because she wanted to remain irresponsible, and here she was talking about discipline. I could not fight her. No, she would easily beat me up. Neither could I report the issues to Dad, because he would just pick her side as usual. So I did what was best. I called the cops, and they locked my sister up. Maybe she would get a little bit of discipline in jail where she was being detained. My father heard about it, and he asked that I drop the charges against my sister so that she could be released. He never showed concern to his grandchildren who had been the victims of his spoiled daughter's madness. He just wanted his daughter out. I simply refused. When he saw that I was not going to yield to his commands, he decided to threaten me and my mother's jewelry. The only thing I had from her, he claimed that he was going to take it away from me if I did not have my sister released. At this point, I knew I had to act really fast. I was not going to let my sister out, and I was not willing to let my father lay his hands on my mother's jewelry, which I knew for certain that he would. So I quickly moved out of the house with my children. I found a little apartment that I was able to pay for after I sold my mother's jewelry. Yeah, I sold it because I have to survive with my children. And after all that was my mom had said before she died, I realized enough money from the sale of the gold could keep me and my kids afloat for a long time. My kids actually resumed school. I continued working in the factory. My father would often come looking for me, but that's not because he missed me and the children, oh no. It's because his daughter was still detained and awaiting trial. He stopped coming around when I threatened to call the police on him if he ever showed up at my workplace or around me and my kids again. Well, let's fast forward a little bit. My sister was tried and sentenced to 8 years in the slammer, while my dad, who went on 6 months later to catch AIDS, is currently battling for his life with no one to take care of him. Well, it serves him right though. His AIDS is getting worse and worse, and if he treated me and I and the kids right, perhaps he'd still be living together while I took care of him. I know my mom wanted us to live in peace, but some folks are just not to be meant in your life. Even though they may be family, I and the children may not be living the best now, but there's definitely hope for us. I believe that I would get married in the future and they would finally get a father figure in their lives who would love and cherish them. Besides, our peace of mind was more important than all the money in the world. Guys, I'm not gonna lie. The saddest part of that story had to be when OP basically was forced to sell the jewelry so she can start her own life and get out of this toxic situation she found herself in. The good thing is, before her mother passed away, the one wish that she told her, please, sell this jewelry so you can start your own life. Well, looks like she got her wish, guys. Let me know in the comment section down below, do you think she should have sold this jewelry or not? The final story of the day is titled, Am I the A-hole for not inviting my pregnant sister-in-law to Thanksgiving? Guys, like I said earlier, you're going to want to subscribe just in case there's any updates that come out for these stories. You'll be the first one to see it. I'm also going to be adding playlists to the channel, so it's easier to keep track of all the stories, parts, part 1, part 2. You won't have to look for it anymore. It'll be under a playlist. Here's the final story of the day. I'm 33 and female, and I hosted Thanksgiving this year. Every year, it rotates between me, my sister, and my brother's homes. It's a pretty big gathering that normally involves my siblings, their partners, my sister's kids, and our parents. This year, my brother James and his wife Becky are having their first child. The baby's due in the spring. We have a traditional Thanksgiving meal, watch the parade, play games as a family, a couple drinks together in the evening, the usual stuff. Same kind of thing every year. This year, a couple weeks back, I get what's basically a list of demands from Becky and our family group chat. She wants to come, but her pregnancy means some things. Need to be adjusted, quote. Her rules were no poultry, as the smell makes her sick, no alcohol, as the smell makes her even more sick, and she can't join in. The food needs to be served early, as she needs to nap during the time it's normally served. And she doesn't want to play the games, as she's tired easily, so we can just listen to music and talk in the evening instead. I was upset about this. Firstly, none of us are vegetarian, so I don't really know how to prepare a turkey alternative. But secondly, I'd already ordered the turkey, and it seems like a waste. And to not be able to drink and eat when we want to, or even play our games in the evening, just feels unreasonable. When 9 of us won't get to celebrate in the way we're used to. In the family chat, I replied and said, while I would make her a non-poultry meal, and would make sure people don't drink at the table, I would not ban poultry or alcohol from the house, and I certainly would not be missing Monopoly, particularly as my niece and nephew are now old enough to join in, and they loved it last year. Both James and Becky said I was being unreasonable and that she's pregnant, so I need to be more understanding. My mom joined in and said it's not hard to accommodate, but I was really annoyed by this point. I told Becky she's uninvited if she can't accept any compromise whatsoever. James called me separately to say I'm excluding her and ruining their Thanksgiving, and she can't help how she feels during pregnancy. I said I wasn't excluding her, and she's welcome if she can accept that Thanksgiving has to work for everyone else too. Well, in the end, neither Becky or James came. It was a weird day without them, and I'm sad they weren't there, but I feel like I wasn't unreasonable. I do want to make amends, but am I the a-hole? Okay, so here's the top comment. Not the a-hole. If Becky wants a Thanksgiving organized exactly to specifications that are exact opposite of yours, James or one of the other people insisting she needs to get whatever she wants because she's pregnant can organize it for her. Why is this OP's problem? Guys, I would have to agree with that. I don't think that you can get your cake and eat it too. Thank you so much for joining me for this story, guys. Drop your thoughts down below. Would you accommodate for the Thanksgiving dinner or say, hey, this is family tradition. We won't drink at the table because we know you don't like the smell, but we're not getting rid of drinks, and especially, we're not getting rid of the board games. Alright guys, smash that like button, drop your comments down below. Mr. Redito will catch you in the next one. Peace!